Chapter 260. Dustless couldn't help but be suspicious. There is no doubt that there are only 9 bijou in the world, and there is no other bijou. Orochimaru has seen a lot of things over the years, but I underestimated him. There was a sudden flash of inspiration in his mind. The clouds and mist that blocked his eyes suddenly disappeared. Wuchen immediately understood the cause of the matter. It seemed to be Kyuubi's chakra. How could he have Kyuubi's chakra? After a long silence, Black Zetsu immediately concluded that the violent orange chakra was definitely Kyuubi's, but what he didn't understand was why Kyuubi's chakra appeared in Orochimaru's hand. It is reasonable to say that there is no Kyuubi's chakra in the world. After Dustless attacked Konoha together with Obito, he forcibly used the Geto Mazo to extract Kyuubi's chakra, but because of Minato's interference, half of Kyuubi's chakra was sealed in the Geto Mazo's body, and the other half was in Uzumaki Naruto. And after that, Obito extracted Kyuubi's Yin attribute chakra. As for where he put it, only Obito himself knows. Is it? Suddenly raising his head and looking at the 2 figures that suddenly appeared in the barrier, Dustless's eyes flashed with understanding, and said, it turned out to be the 2 brothers. In the 4 purple flame array, 2 figures suddenly appeared, or rather, they came out from the ground. These 2 people were tall and muscular, with a streamlined beauty, full of explosive power. One of them had blonde hair, and the word gold was engraved on his shoulder, and the other had silver hair, and the word silver was engraved on his shoulder. They were the 2 brothers Jin Jiao and Yin Jiao, who have been dead for many years. Orochimaru is quite good, he is so willing to give him the Edo Tensei, such a brilliant ninjutsu. Staring at the 2 lifeless brothers and their black skin, faint ripples appeared in his deep black eyes. Dustless was sure that this was the so-called Edo Tensei. The only thing he didn't expect was that Orochimaru would give this ninjutsu to Kabuto. The reason why Kyuubi's chakra exists in their bodies is because they devoured Kyuubi's flesh in the past, so Kyuubi's chakra exists in their bodies. But they didn't explode because of Kyuubi's huge power, their strength seems to be good. Dustless said, and then he suddenly remembered that the Edo Tensei army of the 4th Shinobi World War was all from Kabuchi. Orochimaru probably didn't expect that he would be devoured by Sasuke, and the corpses Zetsu's corpses collected over the years fell into Kabuto's. For 2 years, I'm afraid that Orochimaru has been collecting these corpses, and the number is probably not small. I really can't underestimate him. Black Zetsu cautiously stared at the 2 brothers in the barrier, and his hoarse voice was heavy. There are countless strong corpses in this world. Not to mention the other ninja villages, the number of powerful ninjas in the 5 major ninja villages is extremely large. If they gather together, it is definitely enough to subvert the world. At the same time, a strange light flashed in Black Zetsu's eyes. Although it was very obscure and fleeting, Dustless, who has been secretly staring at Black Zetsu, still saw it clearly. This old guy really has Uchiha Madara's body in his hands. No wonder I couldn't find it after so many years. Does he want to give Madara's body to the enemy? Sneering in his heart, Dustless looked at Black Zetsu calmly. This old guy is very careful, and he is the most dangerous existence. However, it hasn't reached the situation yet, and Dustless is too lazy to pay attention to him. Sasori and Deidara are not easy to deal with this time. The 2 monsters in the Cloud Village are not easy to deal with, and according to the current situation, Orochimaru should have more than just a few corpses. He should also have the corpses of the previous generations of Kage. Thinking quickly, Dustless still remembered that during the 4th Shinobi World War, Kabuto, who was fused with Orochimaru, could summon a large number of undead from another world, which played a decisive role in the war. These 2 masters will be busy, I hope they won't be killed. White Zetsu said with a frivolous tone, with a hint of gloating, but his expression looked quite calm. Obviously, he didn't worry about the life and death of Sasori and Deidara. Because Dustless's body is here, Sasori and Deidara can't be in danger. Let's go, Zetsu. Glancing faintly at the 2 brothers, Dustless's eyes were filled with disappointment. Since it is not Nibi, there is no need to stay here. Dustless doesn't care about the weak chakra of Gold Horn and Silver Horn at all, not to mention that the Kyuubi-yin attribute chakra is in the hands of Obito. Let's go, but Sasori and Deidara, speaking of this, Black Zetsu looked at Dustless in astonishment. This is Otogekyur surrounded by strong enemies, and there may be a large number of ninjas after the Edo Tensei. Deidara and Sasori are in danger. Dustless's current meaning seemed to be abandoning Dead Ale and Scorpion. Zetsu, you have been clear about one thing from beginning to end. The calm eyes fell on Black and White Zetsu who were stunned. Dustless looked at the fight that had started in the enchantment and said faintly, "This is the cruelty of this world. The survival of the fittest. Dead Ale and Scorpion can escape this disaster, which means that they are worthy of our use. If they can't pass, they can only stop here." The indifferent and ruthless voice spread out as if he was talking about something not worth mentioning. Dustless's tone was very flat, without any emotional fluctuations. This is the real him. Once he decides that someone has lost their value, he will throw them away like trash. Even if this chess piece is very powerful, he is no exception. Facing Dustless's calm face, Black Zetsu's heart was particularly depressed. At this moment, Dustless is the real Uchiha Dustless. Chapter 261. Wu Chen's deep black eyes indifferently looked at the void in front of him. His face was expressionless. Life in the world should be straightforward. It would be ridiculous to limit one's thinking for the so-called plan. It's okay to save people, but it also requires the other party to pay the price for his rescue. Dustless doesn't think that Sasori and Deidara in front of him are worthy of his help. They're just pawns, so what if they die? Dustless is not the captain of the fire brigade, where the fire is put out. You're really cold, Dustless, Sama. White Zetsu spoke without thinking. Compared to Black Zetsu, White Zetsu's thoughts were much simpler. At least, compared to Black Zetsu, it was much simpler. Your master and I are the same kind of person, Zetsu. Dustless glanced at White Zetsu faintly. The so-called master is naturally Uchiha Madara. Dustless thinks that compared with Uchiha Madara, his dead partner, he feels much purer and kinder. White Zetsu just shrugged. This is indeed a fact, because the steps Dustless is taking now are still according to Madara's Eye of the Moon plan. Boring, Orochimaru, this old guy's abacus is loud, but in the end, it's all in vain. Dustless stared at Jinjio and Jinjio in the barrier in front of him, and said faintly. After spending so much effort, the person who benefits in the end is still Kabuto. What makes Dustless speechless is that Black Zetsu is suspected of colluding with the enemy. In order to achieve the purpose of resurrecting Otsutsuki Kagaya, he will do anything. His mind can't be estimated by common sense. So far, but that old guy Orochimaru doesn't seem to show up. Dustless frowned without a trace, and wondered. As the leader of Otogekyur, Orochimaru, the most important leader, hasn't come to the stage yet. It's very suspicious. There's no need to think about what this old guy is planning. I hope you two can come back to life. Glancing at Dead Ale and Scorpion from the corner of his eyes, Dustless immediately turned around and left. When he was about to turn around and leave, a black afterimage suddenly rushed toward him. It was extremely fast, like lightning, with a faint dazzling light. So fast. A faint ripple appeared in his calm pupils. Dustless smiled in relief. He calmly stared at the sound that came from afar, and a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. Dustless stood there calmly, his entire body exuding a noble aura. He gazed indifferently at the black shadow that was speeding towards him. His deep gaze suddenly turned piercingly cold. The black shadow's speed instantly slowed down by 100 times. In Dustless's eyes, it was like a crawling tortoise. So. A sharp and cold light fell from the sky. The cold light of the blade was aimed at Dustless's head. The cold light passed through the air, and the Tachi was mercilessly chopped down with full force. Flaws, slow speed, did you lose your skills because of anger? It seems that the instinctive emotions of human beings affected your swordsmanship. Boy, you're still too far away from me. After some comments, Dustless raised a gentle smile. He stood with his hands behind his back and didn't dodge. He just closed his eyes leisurely. The sharp cold light fell straight from the top of Dustless's head, splitting his body in half. Is this the jutsu that Orochimaru said can ignore physical attacks? Seeing Dustless's whole body glowing with light, the black shadow of Dustless who was sneak attacking him quickly flashed away, revealing a cold and handsome face. He was holding a sharp and straight tachi. The cold light of the tachi reflected his contempt for everything. Judging from the bones, the person who sneak attacked Dustless was undoubtedly a young boy. His facial features were handsome, clean, and capable. He had deep three-tomo Sharingan. His slightly messy hair fluttered in the wind. His expression was cold. He was holding a cold and shining tachi. His eyes were sharp like an eagle's, and he despised everything. The aura of the whole person was extremely huge, giving people a feeling that he was invincible. Although the boy was only at the level of invincibility, he had already achieved something. The pride and fearlessness in the depths of his soul moved even Dustless slightly. Compared to Dustless, who gave people a gentle and elegant impression, the boy in front of him was a god of war who cut through thorns. The exposed chest had obvious abdominal muscles, which were neat and well-shaped. Obviously, it was obtained after a long period of hard training. The boy's scarlet three-tomo Sharingan looked at Dustless. His eyes were full of hatred and complexity. Yo, Sasuke, it's the first time we meet and you're so cruel. It's really embarrassing. Staring at the boy a few feet away, Dustless's face swept a gentle smile. The gentle smile made people feel like they were bathing in a cool breeze. He didn't look like a bad guy at all. It was a sharp contrast to some of the murderous Akatsuki members. Even Uchiha Sasuke lost his mind for a moment. Dustless's face was somewhat similar to Itachi's. We're brothers. We shouldn't kill each other. Just like Itachi and I did together, shut up. Sasuke's face suddenly became ferocious, and the sword of Kusanagi in his hand trembled. His scarlet three-tomo Sharingan became clearer and deeper. He glared at Wuchen, and endless murderous intent broke out of his body. His whole body was full of murderous intent. How many people has this boy killed over the years? Perceiving the rage in Sasuke's body, Dustless couldn't help but frown. There was a difference between this murderous intent and his, but it also reflected that Sasuke had killed a lot of people over the years. Most of them were masters. Uchiha Dustless. Sasuke's eyes were locked on Dustless. His voice was particularly hoarse and harsh, like the sound of steel rubbing against each other. My foolish brother. Hate, escape, complain about your cursed fate, you tragic child who is about to be crushed to death by the gears of fate. I will personally take your head and awaken my Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 262. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes glowed as he looked at Dustless greedily. In his eyes, Dustless at this moment was like a fat meat waiting to be slaughtered. It was a shortcut for him to open his Mangekyo Sharingan. Holding the slender tachi in his hand, Sasuke's eyes turned blood red, and his cold and emotionless face was reflected on the tachi. There was no doubt that he really wanted to kill Sasuke. It's really rare to see such a crazy kid. You're betting your life on this duel, boy. White Zetsu looked at Sasuke in astonishment. His eyes flashed with sarcasm. He really didn't know if this guy was too arrogant or too confident in his own strength. In his eyes, Sasuke's words were nothing more than self-humiliation. If Dustless was so easy to kill, he would have been killed during the Third World War. How could Sasuke, who only opened 3 tomo, be able to kill him? You know that opening Mangekyo is to kill your loved ones. It seems that Itachi told you a lot of things. For Sasuke's previous arrogant remarks, Dustless just smiled and didn't care about it. After all, everyone had a young and frivolous time. But you said a lot of nonsense. Dustless's calm expression froze. The corners of his mouth gently rose, his eyes narrowed, and he shrugged, showing a warm and brilliant smile. Sasuke directly vomited blood. However, it's useless. If you don't like it, come and kill me, I promise I won't run. After that, Dustless looked at Sasuke with a frivolous expression. The smile on his mouth was full of provocation, indicating that Sasuke didn't need to hold back. A mere 3-tomo Sharingan wasn't worthy of Dustless's attention. The gap between them was like the sky and the earth. They were not on the same level, and the dimension couldn't be touched. Sasuke heard the words and stared at Dustless with an even more unfriendly face. The murderous aura spread out, and the temperature dropped to the freezing point. His body moved, and the chakra all over his body gathered at the tip of his feet. The speed was exerted to the limit of the body. In just a blink of an eye, he came to Dustless's side. His katana passed through Dustless's body, but it was still directly nullified by the elementalization. It's useless, your weak attack has no effect on me. Golden light gathered on the tip of his feet, and Dustless jumped up and kicked towards Sasuke. The powerful force was enough to tear the mountain. His pupils suddenly shrank. From the kick's kick, Sasuke's powerful enough to crush him. He didn't hesitate to block. Boom! Even with the katana's power, Sasuke's body's too. The speed is even faster than before. The Uchiha clan is really a monster. Black Zetsu looked with interest at Sasuke, who was easily kicked away. Just a moment ago, Sasuke's speed and katana's strength improved. It can be seen that his anger has calmed down and turned into a beast concentrating on fighting. The Uchiha clan is the descendant of Rikudo. Their potential is definitely extraordinary, and they seem to have more advantages than Senju. Recalling the outstanding figures of the Uchiha clan, White Zetsu was surprised. As the descendant of Rikudo, the Uchiha clan's genes seemed to be much stronger. During the Warring States period, there were heroes like Madara and Azuna. Later, there were people like Obito and Shisui. Now, with Dustless and the other two brothers, such a luxurious lineup is fully worthy of the title of the most powerful clan. On the other hand, Senju is also full of talents, but only the two brothers, Hashirama and Naidame, and the current fifth Hokage, Tsunade, are good. Is that so? Maybe that's the case. The Uchiha clan is a naturally evil clan. Glancing at Black Zetsu, Dustless whispered. Black Zetsu, and White Zetsu were all created by Madara. Black Zetsu is actually Kagaya's will. Naturally, he knows that the Uchiha clan is the descendant of Rikudo Sennin. This kid's progress is really fast. How come all the good things are in the hands of these two brothers? Looking at Sasuke with jealousy, Dustless couldn't help but laugh at himself. If it weren't for the system, maybe he would have been killed by Itachi's simple, stupid brother. This guy is so terrifying. Wiping the blood stains from the corner of his mouth, Sasuke stood up and stared at Dustless. He secretly thought that if he doesn't use his trump card, this simple attack can't hurt Dustless at all. You must die. Gritting his teeth and glaring at Dustless, Sasuke's murderous aura became purer. His crazy training was not for today, but the enemy's strength made him feel powerless. He had to fight to the death and take out his biggest card. It was Itachi who killed them both. It has nothing to do with me, Sasuke. Why do you hold on to me like this? Dustless was helpless. This kid's thoughts were too rich. After a long time, he looked at Sasuke with his light eyes and suddenly said, "It seems that you seem to be lacking something, Sasuke." Lacking? Hearing this, White Zetsu was slightly stunned. His pupils dilated, and he looked at Dustless inexplicably. He said incredulously, "Is it possible that Dustless-sama wants to teach this kid ninjutsu? This is helping the enemy." "Of course, it's to teach him how to be a man. This kid doesn't put me in his eyes at all. How can I let him go?" Rolling his eyes, Dustless said in a bad mood. At the same time, he made up his mind to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. After the words fell, his expression suddenly became gloomy, and his eyes were particularly ferocious. A dazzling golden luster circled around his fingertips, and the tiny light penetrated through everything. Obviously, he was serious. How to be a man. You don't seem to be qualified to talk about others. Black Zetsu and White Zetsu complained in their hearts. They secretly scolded Dustless for being shameless. His life was flawed, and he even said that he wanted to teach Uchiha Sasuke how to be a man. Chapter 263. Uchiha Sasuke was always in a state of tension. His handsome and resolute little face was full of caution, especially his 3-tomo Sharingan locked on the light beam at his fingertips. The light beam seemed to be harmless, but in fact, it could easily penetrate any part of his body. Ignorant, you think you can defend against the impact of light by keeping your guard up? Ridiculous. Seeing Sasuke's expression, Dustless sneered again and secretly said, "Is it useful? Today I will let you, a country bumpkin who has always followed Orochimaru, widen your knowledge. Orochimaru is very strong, but there are many people who are stronger than Orochimaru." Laser. The thumb-sized light beam shot straight out, and almost in the blink of an eye, the bright light whistled and filled Sasuke's pupils. So fast. His eyes suddenly shrank. Sasuke didn't hesitate to choose to dodge sideways, but when he pulled back, his left arm suddenly hurt, and his face suddenly turned pale, and the blood on his face was swallowed up, and he was very weak. Poochie. Blood splashed in the air, and looking at it, he saw that the golden straight luster penetrated Sasuke's arm, leaving a scorched thumb-sized hole, and the wound was still emitting white steam. "With your current speed, you can't escape my attack." Looking at Sasuke lightly, Dustless said calmly. "People's reaction can't be faster than light." Dustless's expression was leisurely and calm, full of confidence, and his eyes were like an ancient well, looking at Sasuke calmly, silently and invisibly mocking his weakness. Dustless's look was obviously saying, "I will stand here and not move. If you have the ability, come at me. There's a limit to how arrogant you can get. You can't even be considered a beginner." Seeing Sasuke's face full of unwillingness, Dustless sneered, and mercilessly hit him, and said, "Take off my head and open Manjiki Sharingan. A waste like you is 100 years too early. It's you who is arrogant." Enduring the severe pain, Sasuke smiled at Dustless, and the suppressed hatred in his heart burst out in an instant, and even the pain in his arm disappeared in an instant. Katan, Great Fire Dragon Technique. Several fiery heads came out of Sasuke's mouth, opening their fiery red fangs. The dense blazing fangs could easily tear the human body into pieces, and the power was great. "Little brat, how can this kind of ordinary ninjutsu work on Wuchen?" Hopelessly locked Sasuke, a deep disappointment flashed in Black Zetsu's eyes. He sighed in his heart. He also expected Sasuke to beat up Dustless in the future. Now it seems a bit uncertain. They are not in the same dimension at all. Kid who likes strength, but this kind of ninjutsu. Wu Chen's expression was natural as he stared at the fire worm without fear. This kind of fragile ninjutsu was not necessary for him to resist, and there was no need to move. Whiz. At this moment, the situation suddenly changed. The fire dragon heads that were about to attack turned and rushed into the depths of the endless void, and disappeared into the clouds, as if they evaporated out of thin air. What is this kid thinking? Is it that jutsu? No, it's that jutsu. Squinting his eyes and looking at the dark depths of the void, Dustless thought, feeling the change in the weather in the depths of the void, and the uncertainty in his heart turned into certainty. His goal was not me from the beginning. With a sharp light in his eyes, Dustless seemed to see through the layers of the void for a moment, and the violent lightning elements gathered in the depths of the clouds were all in his eyes. The climate of the land of rice is extremely moist, and it is easy to rain. This kid now uses Katan to generate an updraft, and then the updraft generates cumulonimbus clouds, and finally a thundercloud. This kid is not bad. Casting an appreciative look at Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless was not stingy with his praise. Whiz whiz whiz, in succession, several huge fireballs poured into the void and disappeared into the depths of the clouds, as if swallowed by the dark universe and merged into the sky. Buzz 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 buzz. After a while, the color of the gloomy dark sky became deeper and richer, like a coat of hell, revealing ominous, dyeing the entire sky with its color. Especially the silver light that was obscurely refracted from the depths of the clouds, it was enough to tear a person's soul. It was a gigantic thundercloud with lightning flashing around it. This jutsu has a large range. Looking at the large thundercloud in the sky, the coverage was almost a few thousand meters, and the bright lightning poured down from the ninth heaven, covering the entire earth. It's time to go. If we continue, we will be affected. Staring at the large thundercloud in the sky, Black Zetsu cautiously said. He couldn't help but look at Sasuke in a new light. He didn't expect this kid to have such a trump card. I wanted to test his strength and then use this jutsu. But, at this point, I can only fight. Fiercely squeezing his fists, Sasuke's eyes were replaced by ruthlessness and ferocity, and hysterical madness was beating in them. Although he didn't want to admit it, the reality was so cruel, and it was not something he could touch at the moment. He could only use his whole strength to fight with him once. Boom! An ear-piercing rumble resounded through the clouds, and the pitch-black night sky instantly became as bright as day. Looking up, in the depths of the void, countless bolts of lightning were rolling and surging, crackling as they resounded. Tens of thousands of rays of light gathered here with a great momentum, extending for several kilometers and covering the sky and the sun. It was as if the hand of a god had overturned the universe, and the sword was pointed to the 9 heavens, revealing a supreme power that could compete with the heavens and the earth. Under the lightning, Dustless was alone, thin, and completely opposite to Sasuke, who controlled the lightning and domineering. The hurricane raging in the sky stirred his messy hair back and forth, and he was extremely fragile. Dustless was abandoned by the world, and half of his foot had already stepped into hell, and he could be destroyed in a snap of the fingers. Chapter 264. Lifting his eyes slightly, Dustless stared at the thunderclouds in the sky. His eyes were calm and fearless, as if he was the only one who was sober. His eyes then fell on Uchiha Sasuke's arrogant face. Seeing the former's face full of hostility, Dust's face was as usual. His indifference made Sasuke even angrier, feeling that he was being despised. Under the oppression of the majestic momentum, Dustless's performance was extremely casual. His face was indifferent and natural. Even the corners of his mouth outlined a soft arc. His smile was like a spring breeze, giving people a feeling of unusual elegance. Facing such a terrible scene, his performance was very leisurely, as if he was taking a walk in the tea garden after dinner, showing a look of enjoyment. Being in hell with a smile on his face, this is the best contempt and irony. I hope you can be so calm later. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, Sasuke said with a murderous voice. He was an extremely conceited and arrogant person. Now Dustless was like a lazy sunbathing, how could he not be angry? But what was that feeling just now? Sasuke's eyes flashed a little bit of clarity. Sasuke's heart was heavy, and the unprecedented feeling of hesitation just now made his firm heart waver. Dustless was obviously close, but it gave him a feeling of being far away. There was always a mysterious veil that prevented Sasuke from seeing through the essence of Dustless. This feeling of seeing a flower in the fog made him very uncomfortable and unacceptable. And the mysterious veil that prevented him from peeping at Dustless was strength. It was precisely because the gap between him and Dustless was too big that there was this feeling of being unable to detect, but Dustless saw through his life at a casual glance. Are you kidding me? His whole body suddenly flashed with a silver luster, and the previous thoughts in his heart instantly disappeared. Staring at Dustless, Sasuke's murderous intent was revealed. Chidori. Hum, 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 the sharp and ear-piercing cries of birds resounded through the clouds, as if thousands of migratory birds were competing. The entire world was filled with the roar of birds. Looking around, Sasuke's hand was pulsing with a silver ball of light. It was all condensed from the power of thunder and lightning. It was so powerful that it could easily penetrate a small mountain. However, the most terrifying thing wasn't the domineering 1,000 birds. Instead, it was the sudden appearance of the lightning energy that made the thunderclouds in the sky become even more violent. It was like a stormy sea that violently rolled and surged. Ao ao ao, the roar of a wild beast was emitted from the thunderclouds. Immediately, a furious roar that contained the strength of lightning exploded apart, blowing away the dark clouds that covered the sky. The thunderclouds completely scattered. They originally thought that they would be able to see clear sunlight, but in reality, this was not the case. The most terrifying thing was at the very end. Looking up at the sky, he saw a large dark blue creature covering the entire sky. It's really a ferocious monster. The power is also not bad. It can even create an S-class ninjutsu by itself. You deserve to be Itachi's third brother, Sasuke. It seemed that he had forgotten that Sasuke was a big enemy in front of him. Dustless's pupils were locked on the huge dark blue monster, sincerely praising Sasuke's jutsu. The dark blue body covered the sky, like a giant millstone blocking the sun, shrouding Sasuke's back. The ferocious big mouth roared with ancient murderous intent. Like an ancient mythological beast, it could destroy the world. Kirin, it looks pretty good. The aura and charm of a mythological beast are all there, but it seems to lack the most indispensable thing, seeing the huge monster baring its teeth at him, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Dustless just chuckled. His eyes stayed on Sasuke, then he shook his head. What do you have to sigh about? Staring angrily, Sasuke asked gloomily. Dustless's emotional voice was harsh and horrifying in his ears. It was mocking his powerlessness. Are you sure you want to listen? Wuchen pretended to be in a dilemma and shrugged. His expression was also quite tangled. His pitiful appearance made people unable to help but smile. But for the sake of you humbly begging me, I will reluctantly fulfill your humble wish. Your jutsu is really good, Sasuke, and the shape is like a mythological beast, but the strength is only at the level of an animal. It's really sad, Sasuke. Wuchen was no longer as calm as before. His unbridled mockery resounded through the Qilin in name only. The contempt in his eyes could be seen at a glance. Ouch! The large blue monster on top of Sasuke's head seemed to understand Dustless's ridicule and disdain. It immediately raised its head and roared at Dustless. The ferocious meaning was obviously saying, don't treat me like a vase. Reckless thing, now I'll let you taste the ultimate strength of this animal-level mythological beast. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, the calmness in Sasuke's eyes was instantly filled with endless murderous intent. At the same time, the silver light in his hand began to rage. The dazzling light became more intense and scorching, making people unable to open their eyes. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. Whoosh! The harsh sound of breaking the air sounded. Looking up, it was a straight silver light whistling out, instantly penetrating Dustless's chest. Ah, it's really ferocious. Looking at the silver lightning on his chest, Wuchen said indifferently. His expression did not change, and he was calm and collected. Suddenly, a dark shadow suddenly fell, and the ground reflected the shadow of the roaring monster. Looking up, the thunder and lightning Qilin seemed to be guided by God and pounced on Dustless. Clad in armor, it was particularly awe-inspiring and domineering. With its scarlet eyes, it was awe-inspiring without being angry. No matter what the strength is, the appearance is always good. Of course, it's just the appearance. Chapter 265. With the roar of the giant thunder and lightning Kirin, the entire sky was clear again, and the cloudy sky also lost Sasuke's deterrence and returned to normal. Sasuke coldly looked at Dustless with his hands folded in front of him. There was no emotion in his eyes. In his world, perhaps since he defected from Konoha, the so-called humanity has been completely abandoned. At least, Sasuke thought that he had abandoned everything, including the fetters of the past. Accept the curse of fate as you struggle at death's door. The three Tomo Sharingan swayed with monstrous hostility, and Sasuke hissed hysterically. Perhaps it was because he spent 2 years with Orochimaru, the king of snakes. Unknowingly, Sasuke was also infected with Orochimaru's habits. Although he didn't lick his snake head like Orochimaru when he spoke, he still had the crazy viciousness of snakes. Suddenly, there was a burst of fainting in his mind, and Sasuke's thoughts were in a trance. Side effects. Although the power of this move is strong enough, the consumption of chakra is too much. Grasping his face tightly, Sasuke's pupils fell on Dustless, who was about to be swallowed by Kirin. Such a once-in-a-lifetime good show naturally couldn't be easily missed. Boom boom boom, the moment the giant dark blue beast touched the ground, the light all over its body rose to the limit. The power in its body seemed to be unable to bear it any longer, and it shattered with a bang. The energy fluctuations scattered in all directions swallowed everything around it, and it was a mess. What a large range, a duel between monsters. Zetsu, who was watching in the distance, looked at the destroyed and scorched ground around him, and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. That ferocious giant blue head was terrifying in his eyes. Thunder and lightning is the most violent factor in the world, and its power is strong enough to destroy everything. To some extent, it is the incarnation of the will of heaven and earth. In the face of the irresistible sky, the hearts of all creatures will be filled with indescribable fear. It's a trembling from the depths of the soul, and it's impossible to give up. Even Ju was filled with fear when facing the armored monster with fangs. The reason was none other than the fact that even a god would be imprisoned under the firmament. Flowers bloom and wilt, the sun sets and rises from the east, all living things go through the cycle of reincarnation. This was the law of iron, and it was also a law that had never changed since ancient times. It was not something that could be escaped just because one said so. It seems like someone is here to mess things up. White Zetsu frowned and murmured in a low voice. He couldn't help but be speechless. Every time, he would drop the ball at the critical moment. It seems to be Konoha's Kyubi kid. You're really haunting me. Black Zu frowned as well. Every time this little brat seemed to, accidentally, come out to mess things up. Let's go to Lord Dustless first. It's not our place to worry. Staring at the destroyed and scorched ground, Black Zetsu decided. If Kyubi comes, no one can stop him, and no one can stop him. Only Dustless can subdue Kyubi when he goes crazy. Especially when he sealed Gaara last time, Kyubi in Uzumaki Naruto's body seemed to have reached a tacit understanding with him. He couldn't use Kyubi's power at will, but he could borrow some chakra from Kyubi. There's no reason for Kyubi, an old fox who has lived for countless years, not to understand. After that, Ju's body sank into the soil and disappeared completely. It was as if he never appeared, and he escaped toward the place where Dustless and Sasuke were fighting. It's really a dangerous S-class ninjutsu. This beast's strength is not bad, and he has some skills, but... In the huge pit filled with dust, there was a burst of laughter. Without a doubt, it was Dustless. Sure enough, he didn't get killed. Sasuke didn't feel any surprise when he heard this. He had witnessed Dustless's jutsu that ignored physical attacks. He originally wanted to use Kirin's large-scale jutsu to see Dustless's weakness, but now it seems that it was obviously a waste of effort. Especially when he heard the word, "but," from Dustless's mouth, Sasuke's heart was particularly angry. Every time Dustless said these two words, something happened that made him upset. A powerful beast is still a beast, and its essence hasn't changed. A harsher sound came out of the dust. Sure enough, it was as harsh as Sasuke had guessed before, and his calm heart instantly exploded. Just as he was about to step forward and fight with Dustless, a sense of powerlessness poured into his body, slowing down Sasuke's actions. A sense of exhaustion came into his mind, and his bones seemed to be taken away. He was very weak, and Sasuke realized that he didn't have much chakra left. Kakaka, at this moment, the ground at Dustless's feet suddenly cracked, and the figure wrapped in nepenthes was clearly visible. There was only one person in the whole world dressed like this, and there was no doubt that it was Zetsu. That kid Kyubi came out again, and there were several of his companions. Following Zetsu's gaze, he saw that Dustless's expression was normal, and his clothes were very clean and spotless, completely opposite to Uchiha Sasuke. I'm afraid it was Orochimaru who deceived him. Thinking of Orochimaru, who never appeared, Dustless's heart was unusually determined, and at the same time, he asked calmly, "What's the situation of Sasori and Deidara? They didn't die together, right?" Thinking of Kabuto's Edo Tensei army, Dustless asked curiously. After all, Orochimaru collected a lot of strong corpses, and even some Kage corpses were all plundered by him. Even if Scorpion of the Red Sand and Dead Ale were killed, Dustless was not surprised. The Edo Tensei powerhouses had a great advantage. Although using charms to completely control the opponent's thoughts would reduce their strength, they were still very strong. Moreover, their numbers were as many as ants. Facing a tide-like pincer attack, Dustless did not think that Scorpion and Dead Ale would be safe and sound. Chapter 266. Thinking about the power of Edo Tensei, in the Fourth Shinobi World War, Kabuto even used this jutsu to change the situation. In the end, if Itachi didn't use Izanami in time, the world might have been completely subverted. Immortal and indestructible body, unlimited chakra, it was definitely a super nightmare existence. Kyubi. Don't worry about that kid, Zetsu. After lowering his head and pondering for a while, Dustless's eyes flashed with a wise light, indicating that there's no need to care. Naruto is the kind of person who is extremely emotional, and Sasuke is his most important fetter. There's no doubt that the purpose is this kid. As for Sasuke and Deidara, Dustless didn't care. Deidara and Sasuke are in a bad situation. It's not only Jinjiao and Jinjiao who are besieging them, but also the Kage of the 4 major shinobi villages. I'm afraid the final result, speaking of this, Black Zetsu also fell silent. He couldn't help but sweat for Orochimaru's madness. If the outside world knows that the body of the Kage of their village was stolen, I'm afraid they will be furious. If they don't kill Orochimaru, I'm afraid they won't stop. At that time, it's not impossible for the 5 major shinobi villages to form an alliance to suppress Orochimaru. There's no need to care about the life and death of the chess pieces. It's their ability to come out alive. As for their death, they can only blame the 2 of them for not being skilled enough. Casually shooting a glance at Black Zetsu, Wuchen replied without the slightest ripple. Akatsuki was such a crazy organization, survival of the fittest, the road was their own choice, no one forced them. After that, Dustless's eyes were as sharp as a knife. He looked straight through the heavy sand and dust, and Sasuke's embarrassing scene was reflected in his eyes. Because of the process of creating the thundercloud before, this kid consumed a lot of chakra, and now he doesn't have much energy to fight with Dustless. He didn't have that strength, and everything was because of Dustless. It's time to leave, the Nibi Jinchuriki is not here, it's just a trap. White Zetsu glanced at the huge barrier in the distance and couldn't help but shake his head. He was afraid that Dead Ale and Scorpion's fates were extremely miserable. At the same time, he looked at Dustless with a puzzled face and said, Sir Dustless doesn't seem to have the intention to kill him. Not only White Zetsu, but Black Zetsu also looked at Dustless inexplicably. According to Dustless's strength, if he really wanted to kill Sasuke, he could kill him in seconds. Kill him? Why kill him? Smiling mysteriously, Wuchen didn't answer and asked. Looking at Sasuke's eyes, he also had an indescribable color. His pupils faintly emitted green light, as if he was a terrifying beast. Next, I'll let you enjoy the most beautiful scene in the world. The majestic chakra scattered, and the rolling dust suddenly calmed down. The outside environment could be seen clearly. The line of sight swept straight ahead, and Sasuke could be clearly seen gasping for breath. White Zetsu stared at the scene that turned into a flat ground, his head was full of fog. Except for Sasuke himself, there was nothing left on the ravaged surface. It was all desolation, and there was nothing remarkable about it. Black Zetsu's gaze quietly stared at Sasuke without moving. After a while, his eyes flashed with understanding. Sasuke's face is the best beauty. Withdrawing his gaze from Sasuke's body, Black Zetsu said hoarsely. At the same time, he had a better understanding of Dustless's inner viciousness. The man in front of him usually looks gentle and friendly, but his heart is the most vicious kind. There are countless ways to kill a person, but if you choose the most painful way, many people will feel that torturing him to death and causing physical pain is miserable. In fact, it's not. Because there is a word called life is worse than death. Sasuke's face? White Zetsu was stunned when he heard the words. His eyes subconsciously looked at Sasuke's appearance, taking all his emotions into his eyes. Sasuke's face was full of complexity, and his pupils were staring at Dustless fiercely. All the changes in his emotions were exposed in front of him. The struggling eyes were undoubtedly filled with hatred. At the same time, there were thousands of unwillingness and hatred, including self-blame and shame, as well as despair, swirling around Sasuke's face. Yeah, Dustless-sama is really cruel. Black Zetsu said expressionlessly, killing people is just a matter of time. However, the reason why Dustless-sama let him live is to let Sasuke taste his inner feelings now and let Sasuke understand how fragile and powerless he is. An enemy with a blood feud is close at hand, but you can't avenge him. You can't even force the enemy to move a step from beginning to end. Is there anything more ironic than this? Black Zetsu took a deep breath and said. Dustless is really vicious. This is to let Sasuke live in the shadow of his own incompetence. If he can't kill Dustless, the haze in Sasuke's heart will not dissipate, forcing him to live in hatred for a lifetime, like a walking corpse. You can't tear down my stage like this, Black Zetsu. I feel that I'm a lot kinder. Doesn't he want to become stronger? I'm helping him, making him crazier in the future. Laughing at Black Zetsu's previous words, Dustless stared at Sasuke faintly, with a wicked smile on the corner of his mouth. At this moment, it felt particularly terrifying. I just want to see Sasuke like this. He wants to kill me but can't. Dustless chuckled softly. His performance was extremely casual, making Black Zetsu and White Zetsu feel cold all over. Dustless's idea is indeed the same as Black Zetsu's, that is, he wants Sasuke to live in the shadow of his revenge forever, creating a nightmare that can't be broken without killing Dustless. For Dustless, he really needs to see such an ending for Sasuke. He also thinks that such a miserable end is very suitable for him. Chapter 267. With the disappearance of the thunderclouds, the sky gradually returned to clear, the scorching sun shone from the ninth heaven, and the whole earth was bathed in this gentle luster. Everything was recovering, showing signs of prosperity, but there were exceptions. Sasuke stared fiercely at Dustless, his sharp eyes were like knives. For the sudden appearance of Dustless, he couldn't wait to cut him into pieces, but strangely, his ferocious eyes seemed to be grateful. Is this kid's brain short-circuited by Dustless-sama's anger? Haku looked at Sasuke's sudden change in expression and couldn't help but be speechless. This change in mood was too exaggerated. Just now, he was gnashing his teeth and wanted to drink his blood and eat his flesh. But now, his eyes were filled with gratitude. The speed of his face change was really unacceptable. Most likely. Black Zetsu stared at Sasuke, whose face was as usual in an instant, and sighed that Sasuke's face changed too fast. It's not what a human should look like. Before, he was still a mortal enemy, but now he's full of gratitude. This kid, Dustless also looked at Sasuke curiously. This kid's instantaneous change was like coming back from the dead. Sasuke, who was still lifeless and full of despair, was now resurrected with full blood. Especially Sasuke's appearance, full of vitality, gave people the feeling that there was no difference between a cocoon and a rebirth. This isn't the legendary second male protagonist aura outbreak. What kind of shit is this? The corner of his mouth twitched. Dustless was extremely speechless. He secretly slandered in his heart, staring at the reborn Sasuke, and at the same time, there was a flash of light in his mind. I don't know if there will be a most powerful villain aura to resurrect me with full blood when I'm about to die. Second male protagonist aura? Hearing this strange word for the first time in his life, Black Zetsu looked at Dustless with curiosity, and said with great surprise, is this Sasuke's rebirth jutsu? I didn't expect there to be such a magical ninjutsu in the world. This unheard of technique is indeed miraculous. White Zetsu also nodded in agreement. Although he didn't know what kind of mysterious ninjutsu it was, the jutsu that could bring Sasuke back to life must be very powerful. Dustless glanced at Ju. This was a common phrase in the 3D world. Naturally, the natives of the 2D world would not understand it, turning sadness into motivation. This is too illogical. Staring at Sasuke, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Although his purpose was to make Sasuke stronger, and now Sasuke is becoming stronger as Dustless thought, but dark mode is becoming stronger, just like Uzumaki Nagato and Obito, not like this. It's all thanks to you that I can see myself more clearly. As if seeing Dustless's confusion and entanglement, Sasuke had a smile on his face, but it was still as gloomy and indifferent as before. It was because of Dustless's sudden disruption that Sasuke realized that he was so fragile that he lost his goal in the darkness and stayed in the dark space forever. However, there is a saying that things will move in the opposite direction when they reach an extreme. Perhaps it was because of Dustless and Itachi's continuous pressure that Sasuke had a complete mental breakdown. It stands to reason that the people who have a mental breakdown should become walking dead. It's a miracle that Uchiha Sasuke can break out of the cocoon and be reborn. This kid's willpower is really strong. Shaking his head, Dustless's thousands of doubts in his heart suddenly disappeared, attributing this to Sasuke's perseverance. Although he was very uncomfortable with this kid, there is no doubt that his will is really strong. In other words, Sasuke can now correctly understand his past, which is the curse left by Itachi for him. But it's ridiculous to think that you can get rid of the shackles of fate and escape the curse of Uchiha's fate. Sasuke, it seems that I need to give you a more profound memory. I must leave a deeper mark in your heart that is difficult to erase. After that, Dustless's eyes rotated sharply, revealing the Scarlet Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. The surging evil eye power was like a black hole in the Milky Way, swirling with irresistible force. What a strong eye power! Feeling that he was about to be swallowed by the dark power, and the whole person seemed to be swallowed by the violent eye power, Sasuke suddenly became confused, and without hesitation, he took the Kusanagi sword and stabbed his calf. Puchi! Ruddy blood flowed down his calf, soaking the ground and penetrating into the ground, dyeing the soil purple-red. Sasuke, who was in a trance, regained his clarity and looked at Dustless coldly. His expression was particularly firm and unshakable. You are decisive and ruthless. Dustless frowned and followed his line of sight. He could clearly see Sasuke's pale face with sweat on his forehead. He looked like an old man in his twilight years who was about to fall down with a push. Sasuke is indeed a ruthless hero, indifferent to the enemy, and even more ruthless to himself. Both Black Zetsu and White Zetsu nodded in agreement with Dustless's statement. Looking around, they saw that Sasuke's calf had been penetrated by the Kusanagi sword, and the person holding the sword was indeed himself. It was also because of the unprecedented pain that he could get rid of the shackles of Dustless's Sharingan. But Dustless Uchiha is really a monster. He didn't use any jutsu just now. Just the evil of Sharingan made Sasuke hallucinate, Black Zetsu secretly thought. His heart was unusually heavy. Over the years, while he and White Zetsu carried out missions, they also secretly spied on Dustless's strength. However, every time he just moved a little and killed the enemy, he never used his full strength. I will let you relive the old scenes of the past, and remember the past suffering. The corner of his mouth suddenly swept a strange smile. The eternal Manjikyu Sharingan of the pentagram twisted rapidly, and it was countless times more powerful than the previous evil eye power. Sasuke instinctively felt that something was wrong, and when he was about to close his eyes, it was indeed too late. Tsukuyami. As Dustless's magical voice sounded, Sasuke's vision suddenly became empty, and his eyes became gray. He fell to the ground, as if he was facing an unprecedented horror scene. His face was full of fear, and his mouth was foaming. You think you can get rid of the script I wrote for you and become the only transcendence to break the shackles of fate? I really don't know where your confidence comes from. Who do you think is the one who dominated your life? Looking at the fainted Sasuke, Dustless raised his eyelids and cast a pitiful look at Sasuke. The tragedy of who was crushed to death by the wheel of fate could be imagined. Without hesitation, Dustless resolutely turned back. As he was about to step away, a disgusting hiss suddenly sounded. Dustless quickly turned his head and directly threw Amaterasu without any mercy. Ouch! Bastard, since this kid is your enemy, what's wrong with letting me devour him? In the midst of the black flames, there was a miserable shriek. Everyone's attention was focused on the source of the shriek. What came into view was a gigantic white snake with a foul stench all over its body. There was also some unknown liquid around it. Regardless of its smell or appearance, it was the type that made people want to vomit. In the whole world, only Orochimaru can dress like this. It's still as disgusting as ever, whether it's its appearance, actions, or the way of jutsu. It's so ugly that people can't look at it anymore. Looking at the giant serpent, White Zetsu had goosebumps all over his body and said with a chill, "You don't seem to be qualified to talk about others. Compared to you who eats corpses, Orochimaru is much kinder." Looking straight at Orochimaru's body, White Zetsu remembered White Zetsu who often eats corpses, and Black Zetsu couldn't help but make fun of him. Orochimaru won't eat useless corpses anyway. But my means are much more harmonious than his, and at most, it's just recycling waste. Like a cat whose tail was stepped on, White Zetsu roared angrily, and at the same time, he scolded Black Zetsu. Orochimaru's body, that is, the white phosphor serpent, was swallowed by the black ghost fire, and the blazing fire that couldn't be extinguished made him feel pain. "Answer me, Wu Chen. Even if this brat is your younger brother, he's just a useless trash to you. If you want to, you can cultivate someone better than him. Why do you have to stop me? Don't tell me that you still have the ridiculous feelings between brothers in your heart." Orochimaru's hysterical screams made people's scalp numb, and a foul smell blew in their face. The disgusting smell made people dizzy. It's no wonder that Orochimaru was so crazy. Since Dustless hated Sasuke so much, there was no reason not to let him devour him. Dustless smiled slightly when he saw this, and high-density chakra floated on the surface of his body, and covered him like an air cover, easily avoiding the disgusting smell. The reason is very simple, Orochimaru. His eyes were long, and he looked at Orochimaru who was in pain with no expression. Because the Amaterasu fire was too hot, he could smell the stench of barbecue. Even Zetsu couldn't help but feel his lungs churning, and he drilled into the depths of the ground to separate himself from this strange smell. "Look at how many years you haven't taken a bath, how disgusting the smell on your body is." Even Zetsu, who specializes in corpses, is disgusted. Dustless chuckled, and his tone directly made Orochimaru vomit blood. Chapter 268. Orochimaru's eyes suddenly became ferocious, and even the ghost fire Amaterasu on his body was selectively forgotten. Everyone pays attention to dignity and face. Although snakes don't need these, Orochimaru's essence is still human. Even Zetsu, a monster who eats corpses every day, dislikes him and even despises him. How can Orochimaru not be angry? The snake eyes rolled and stared at Dustless. Orochimaru's eyes were full of hysterical madness. "Who are you showing this ferocious look to? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child?" Looking at the angry Orochimaru with a blank expression, Dustless didn't care about provoking him, and the contemptuous smile on the corner of his mouth made Orochimaru have the impulse to tear Dustless into pieces. But this kid can be used. Staring at Sasuke with a cunning look, Orochimaru's huge body twisted, and his disgusting body made Sasuke tremble. The huge body was completely composed of countless wriggling snake heads, and the transparent liquid body was clearly visible. From time to time, many snake heads would raise their heads and spit out snake tongues. The body of Orochimaru's white snake was composed of countless white snakes. No wonder Zetsu, this kind of person who eats corpses, will run away. Dustless's body trembled, and his lungs couldn't help but surge, and there was an urge to vomit. No one can face countless snake heads spitting their tongues at you, and the air was filled with a fishy smell. I'm afraid that even Tetsuo can't maintain a normal expression. Boom. Just as he was about to completely destroy Orochimaru, his majestic large body suddenly burst open, and the scattered small snakes quickly fled, abandoning the original body to escape. The idea is good, but it's still useless. Dustless just smiled softly when he saw this, and the still burning Orochimaru's shell had turned into a snake skin full of texture, and countless white snakes on the ground hurriedly scattered. Orochi's body substitution jutsu can be used to shed skin to defend against Amaterasu's fire. Every white one was actually a clone of Orochimaru. As long as any of them escaped, they could make a comeback. It was not difficult to see how deep Orochimaru's mind was, especially when it came to extending his lifespan and saving his life. Amaterasu is a fire that can devour everything. It's the strongest physical attack. Even billions of clones can only be destroyed by this black willow, the wisp formation. Dustless remained calm as he watched the countless small white creatures flee. At the same time, his eternal kaleidoscope once again released an evil ripple of eye power. He looked up and saw that the Amaterasu on the burning snakeskin had suddenly become darker and darker. The fire was abnormally fierce, shooting straight into the sky and spreading wildly in all directions, engulfing the entire ground. In the blink of an eye, a cage made of Amaterasu was formed. What a rare ability. Zu once again emerged from the depths of the ground. She secretly clicked her tongue as she stared at the flame cage. This ability to control Amaterasu's form was extremely rare, but at the same time, it was also extremely dangerous. It could be used for both defense and attack at the same time. Unbeknownst to her, there was a more terrifying scene happening inside the dark flame cage. Dense black raindrops fell from the sky, like a rainstorm falling on the ground. A large number of white snakes were all burned to death. They didn't even have time to scream before they were annihilated directly. The place where Sasuke fainted was intact, like a second world, and the black raindrops naturally avoided it. In this way, that durable snake has finally died of old age. White Zetsu breathed a sigh of relief. Over the years, he didn't pay attention to Orochimaru's situation. He was already numb to this stinky, hard, and unkillable king of snakes. Who knows? Dustless retracted his gaze from the dark flame cage. He wasn't as optimistic as White Zetsu and gave an ambiguous answer. Through his powerful eye power, Dustless could clearly see the changes in Amaterasu's cage. Most of the white snakes were burned to death by Amaterasu, but there were still some fish that escaped the net, and one of them drilled into Uchiha Sasuke's body. Fortune and misfortune are interdependent, whether you live or die depends on fate. Seeing this, Dustless didn't say much. As for pulling out the white snake that entered Sasuke's body, it was even more impossible, and he had no interest in that. Zetsu, what about Sasori and Deidara? The huge perception spread out, taking in the situation within a radius of tens of kilometers. Dustless frowned and said, Deidara is fine, but Sasori's chakra seems to have disappeared. Was it killed? The eyes of the ancient well surged with unchanging ripples. Dustless's momentum was cold. Even if they had been in the same organization for several years, he didn't show the slightest emotion. It seems that there is still a weak chakra, but it won't last long. White Zetsu's face was expressionless, and there was no emotion in his heart. He had already guessed what Dustless was going to do. Black Zetsu also bowed his head in silence. After thousands of years of dormancy, he had witnessed too many life and death, and he had also thoroughly seen through the ugliness of human nature. Dustless was going to kill Sasori of the Red Sand himself. The previous 4 Purple Flames formation had been completely destroyed, and Deidara and Sasori had also escaped. Although the Edo Tensei army was destroyed by these two uncles countless times, it was still restored countless times. Sasori and Deidara had no advantage at all. Moreover, both of them had suffered extremely serious injuries. Deidara was fine. He rode the giant bird formed by the explosive clay and flew away, but Sasori, who was unable to move, was naturally unlucky. Yes, he has no value of existence. If I kill him myself, I can rest in peace in the underworld. Looking up at the distant sky, Dustless caught the figure who was fleeing in embarrassment, and his eyes flashed with a sinister light. As for Deidara, Dustless selectively let him go. Although Deidara's arms have now been crushed, as long as Kakuzu sews his arms back, he can still lose them, and Sasori has indeed become a pile of scrap metal. Chapter 269. The green grassland stretched as far as the eye could see, like a green gem permanently inlaid in the earth. It was beautiful, and the aura of nature was blowing on the face, making people feel relaxed and happy. In such a situation, anyone would feel sluggish and their mind would relax. Under the shade of the green tree, a red-haired young boy could be clearly seen. Bastard, damn Orochimaru, next time I will tear you to pieces, and that Kabuto who dared to plot against me. The red-haired boy's face was ferocious, and he cursed fiercely, his eyes were red and terrifying. Looking closely, the red-haired young boy was handsome, but his face was full of hostility, revealing a cold murderous aura, and his body was torn to pieces. However, the strange thing was that there was no blood stain on the torn wounds of the young boy, his body was deformed and twisted like plastic and steel, and the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds was torn apart, so that his chest was exposed. Naturally, it was Sasori. Most of the puppets had been destroyed. How big is the world? Where is there a place for me? A desolate sigh came from Sasori's mouth, and there was a rare color of confusion in his eyes. He knew that the Akatsuki organization can no longer go back. That cruel organization is a place that pays attention to strength. Now that most of Sasori's puppets have been destroyed, there is no need to go back, they will be directly abandoned. Damn Kabuto, and Orochimaru, today's hatred, I swear I won't be a man if I don't take revenge. Thinking of the initiators, Orochimaru and Kabuto, Sasori suddenly became angry, his fists clenched tightly, and he couldn't wait to tear the two of them to pieces to vent the hatred in his heart. The number of Edo Tensei army is too dense, and most of them are strong, including some Kage-level powerhouses of some ninja villages. He and Deidara can't do anything alone. Although they destroyed the opponent's puppets countless times, the Edo Tensei still perfectly repaired them. In addition, there is also an inexhaustible supply of chakra. The next few years will be peaceful. Looking at the void in front of him indifferently, Sasori sighed helplessly. 80% of his precious puppets were destroyed, including his body, which suffered great damage. Although many of the puppets could be repaired and used again, his trump card had been destroyed. He had to kill more experts to replenish the puppets he lacked. Speaking of experts, a thin figure involuntarily appeared in Scorpion's pupils. The figure reflected in Kuroto's pupils was obvious. He had messy dark hair, his eyes were bright like stars, his figure was thin, and he wasn't too tall, but he had an indescribable aura. Looking carefully, it was Uchiha Dustless. If I can get him. On second thought, Scorpion's blazing eyes dimmed. This was not realistic. The stronger the person was when they were alive, the more powerful the puppet would be. Especially for a top expert like Dustless, Scorpion was 100% sure that he could make the strongest puppet in the world. If there's a strong corpse like Uchiha Dustless, the situation doesn't look good, Scorpion. An indifferent and calm voice sounded like a ghost. When Scorpion raised his head to take a look, he was surprised to see two tall figures. Like Scorpion, they were wearing black windbreaker embroidered with red clouds. There was no doubt that the people who came were naturally Dustless and Zetsu. Frowning, Scorpion asked in confusion, "Why are you two here?" "Of course, we're here to recover the most important thing." White Zetsu's face was full of banter and ridicule, half of his face was faintly smiling like a cat playing with a mouse. "Sorry, Deidara and I fell into the trap. The news of Nibi's Jinchuriki was a trap." Thinking of the painful experience of being besieged before, Scorpion couldn't help but say with hatred, thinking that Dustless and Zetsu's target was Nibi. "Don't worry, the fox will show its tail sooner or later." Dustless's heart was calm, indicating that Scorpion wasn't worried. As long as the tailed beast didn't die, everything else was fine. As for where it was hiding, it would be exposed sooner or later with the passage of time. Scorpion just nodded when he heard the words. After he was about to ask Dustless about Deidara's situation, the latter's voice suddenly sounded, especially the topic of discussion, which made Scorpion stunned. "Do you want to become an eternal art, Scorpion?" Looking at Scorpion indifferently, Dustless suddenly said in a tone that made people feel like it was a fantasy story. Scorpion stared at Dustless in surprise. To be honest, he didn't think that Dustless had the so-called artistic cells, but he had quite a lot of murderous and bloodthirsty cells. "My art is the pursuit of eternity." When talking about art, Scorpion's slightly decadent expression began to brighten up. Even if Dustless didn't understand what art was, Scorpion was still a very distinguished audience. Dustless didn't give Scorpion a chance to speak freely and interrupted him immediately. That is to say, you also want to become an eternal existence. Wuchen narrowed his eyes and looked at the ring on Scorpion's hand vaguely. Wuchen asked calmly. His imposing manner suddenly converged. He was like a cannonball that was ready to be fired, giving people a feeling of extreme danger. Of course, my art is the pursuit of eternity, and I am no exception. Looking at Dustless in puzzlement, Scorpion nodded and answered seriously. That's good, I will make you an eternal existence. Whoosh, a sharp sound broke through the air. Dustless's figure instantly lost its texture and disappeared. The next second, a dark shadow completely covered Scorpion's body. Scorpion stared blankly at the figure that suddenly appeared. What came into his eyes was Dustless's indifferent face. There was a cold and direct killing intent in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth were also outlined with a strange and evil smile. Instinctively feeling that something was wrong, Scorpion quickly took a step back. Scorpion's eyes were round, and his face was full of surprise. He didn't know when Dustless had grabbed his arm. That terrifying force was like being pressed by a mountain weighing tens of thousands of tons, and he couldn't break free at all. Farewell, Scorpion. The strange smile at the corners of his mouth suddenly froze and turned into endless killing intent. Dustless's right arm suddenly exerted force. Poochie. Scorpion's arm was directly torn off by Dustless's brute force, and the powerful force even almost tore his shoulder, but what was incredible was that there was no blood stain on the torn wound, and the inside of the wound was completely like a screw of steel. What do you mean by this, Uchiha Dustless? After quickly retreating, Scorpion roared at Dustless with a murderous intent. Staring at Dustless with a pale face, Scorpion's murderous intent spread out like a tide. Zetsu. Throwing the removed arm to Zetsu, Dustless smiled at Scorpion and said, "What do I mean? Don't you know what I mean by now? Of course, I am going to kill you." Shrugging lazily, Dustless said indifferently, "The organization no longer needs a waste like you, so naturally, I have to make you shut up in advance. Otherwise, you may be the next Orochimaru. Also, the ring you are wearing will also be taken back. All of Scorpion's puppets have been destroyed, and even his body has been damaged, and now because Dustless forcibly tore off an arm, he is even more fragile. Do you know what to take back now?" Taking off the ring on the arm of the puppet easily, and shaking the previous ring at Scorpion, Zetsu smiled and said, "You no longer have the ability to exist in the organization, so the things on your body must be taken out." Did Pain order you to do this? He really is his loyal lackey. Staring fiercely at Dustless and Zetsu, Scorpion roared hysterically, feeling betrayed and ruthlessly abandoned. That waste wants to order us, he is just a puppet pushed to the forefront. Black Zetsu looked at Sasori mockingly, mercilessly despising him, and sneered, "Seeing how much effort you put into the organization, I will reluctantly tell you that Uzumaki Nagato is Pain, and he is also a clown. That is to say, the person behind the scenes is you, Uchiha Dustless." Glaring at the indifferent Dustless, Sasori of the Red Sand asked with uncertainty, "What about Deidara, was he also killed by you?" Resisting the thousands of anger in his heart, Scorpion screamed and glared at Dustless. "Don't worry, after squeezing out the last value of him, if he doesn't die, I will take care of him myself. Of course, it is the best result if he can be killed." Looking at Scorpion's eyes, Dustless said softly, "Most of you are people who wander between good and evil. You can step into the world of evil, but you can also turn back and start anew. I really can't trust you. In short, Akatsuki is a tool I use to catch tailed beasts. Since tailed beasts are about to gather, your death is the final destination." Dustless's momentum rose to the limit, and he said bluntly. What's more, Dustless doesn't think that Scorpion joined Akatsuki without a purpose. Scorpion is a puppet master who pursues eternity. Making powerful puppets requires powerful corpses. Akatsuki is a super organization where monsters gather naturally. It is also the best place to make the strongest puppets. In other words, every member of Akatsuki has different purposes. In some ways, they are the most trustworthy group of people, but also the least trustworthy. You are an existence who pursues eternity, Scorpion. In that case, you should thank me. Ignoring Sasori, whose face was blue and purple, Dustless smiled and said, just like the group of people who died before, after you die, you will also become an existence like Edo Tensei, which is the eternal immortality you said. Chapter 270. Wu-Chen stared at Scorpion expressionlessly with bloodthirsty luster in his eyes, just like a beast that was about to devour a human. The hidden light made Scorpion's hair stand on end and he involuntarily stepped back. It was the first time in years that he had such an emotion as fear. Damn it, I don't have any strength to resist his attack now. Am I just going to sit here and wait for death? Sasori stared at Dustless in despair, and his heart was full of unwillingness. He was killed by his own people in such an obscure way. It can't be described as aggrieved, it's extremely sad. Such a death is the most ironic end for him. You still want to resist, what can you do in your current state, Sasori? Staring at Sasori calmly, Dustless said faintly, your road is only death, so is the future of Akatsuki, so is Deidara, and so is pain. Sasori naturally joined Akatsuki for a purpose. According to Dustless's guess, it should be to plot the body of the strong. After all, the puppets made by these people are strong enough. It's funny that you are afraid as a puppet. But I'm sorry, goodbye, Sasori. Rich golden photons gathered in the palm of his hand and quickly compressed and condensed. The slender golden sword was obvious. The sword was sharp, and the dazzling luster was enough to destroy and cut everything. Kusanagi sword. What a sharp artifact. Black Zu stared at the big sword in Wu-Chen's hand in surprise and remembered it in his heart. As the incarnation of Huiji's will, he must remember all the moves of the number one enemy who might be his life and death enemy in the future. Black Zetsu always had a feeling that the strongest enemy in the future was not Uchiha Madara, nor Uchiha Obito, but the mysterious character in front of him who has always been like a deep-sea beast. No one knows how strong he is. Those who have seen Dustless's real strength have disappeared, without exception, all of them went to hell. Dustless's entire body glowed with a golden luster. Instantly, his body turned into a stream of light and whizzed out. So fast, this is definitely not some bullshit teleportation technique, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's a space ninjutsu. Black Zetsu's eyes rippled as he stared at the streamer, and he was secretly surprised. Although Black Zetsu believes in the strength of Otsutsuki Kagaya, if the opponent is Dustless, he still has to be cautious. He is even more afraid than Madara. At least he has observed Madara's life and let him live under his own plan. Dustless, on the other hand, was different. From the moment he appeared, he was going against Black Zu's script. Even if there was no change to the plan, there was still a huge difference. Pucci. Looking over, the sharp golden luster pierced through Scorpion's body, killing him in an instant like cutting vegetables, mercilessly cutting him in half. This is the end. As Dustless's voice fell, Scorpion's body suddenly broke into two pieces, and he completely lost his breath. Clean up his body and evacuate. Before Zetsu could react, the light sword in Dustless's hand quickly dissipated, and his body became blurred until he finally disappeared completely between heaven and earth. It's really indifferent, Dustless-sama. White Zetsu watched Dustless disappear and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Looking at Scorpion's body that was brutally divided, he shook his head and walked to Scorpion's side. In the depths of the dark underground, the figure of the ghetto golem could be clearly seen. 10 thick fingers stood on top of it, and in the blink of an eye, it had been 3 days since the previous incident. Scorpion was killed, it's a pity, on the head of Ghetto Mazo, a middle-aged man with orange hair said indifferently. The fluctuations in his voice had no human emotions. Whether it was a pity or not, only God would know. There is no doubt that this person is pain. Deidara's arm was also twisted. Rinnegan opened, and the black lines rippled, looking at Kakuzu. The task of combining Daidara's arm will be handed over to you. He has also served the organization for many years. Even if there is no merit, there is still hard work. His sight then fell on Dustless's body. Pain frowned, and his eyes flashed with suspicion, and immediately seemed to think of something, and the words that were about to come out of his mouth were taken back. The dead are gone, and the road in the future is still looking forward. Today I will introduce a new member to you. Pain's cold voice spread, and the entire dark cave was full of echoes. Everyone's eyes were focused on Pain, and he became the focus of attention in an instant. The requirements to enter Akatsuki were extremely high. Everyone was an S-class rebellious ninja, without exception. In other words, if you want to join Akatsuki, you must have the strength to compete with the Kage-level powerhouses of each village. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know who can join this dark organization. I hope it's a dramatic character who can relieve this heavy and oppressive atmosphere. Kisame said with a smile, and his eyes were full of expectation. It seemed that he was quite curious about the new member that he had never met before. The smile on his shark face was particularly scary. I hope so. Haydn curled his lips, and his face was full of suspicion. Obviously, he had doubts about this newcomer. Wu Chen's face was full of indifference, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. He squinted his eyes, occasionally revealing a sharp light. He stared at the figure hidden in the darkness, and his eyes flashed with understanding. Dustless, who was in an excellent situation, could clearly see the other person's figure, wearing an orange spiral mask, only showing the eyes, wearing a black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, airtight. Sure enough, it's you. Uchiha Obito. No, I should call you Hoodlum now. Staring at the dark shadow that was isolated from the world in the depth of the darkness, Wu Chen's mouth curved into a meaningful smile. After looking at him deeply, Wu Chen closed his eyes calmly and started to daydream. Chapter 271. Uchiha Obito, now known as Hoodlum, joined the Akatsuki shortly after Sasori's death. On the surface, he was Daidara's partner, but in fact, he was the real existence of the Akatsuki behind the scenes, and it can be said that he was one of the biggest black hands. Ta-ta-ta, the sound of footsteps came out from the darkness. The cheerful footsteps were like a child jumping around, very happy, but it gave people a feeling that he hadn't grown up yet. Soon, an unidentified man wearing a spiral mask came into view, although because of the mask, his appearance couldn't be seen. Judging from his figure, he was a middle-aged man. Everyone's eyes were cast over, including Dustless, curiously looking at the masked man. Oh. Don't stare at me like that, I will be shy. It seemed that he couldn't stand this particularly oppressive environment. Uchiha Obito, who was covered by the mask, suddenly chuckled. The sound of a brainless idiot made everyone stunned, and after looking at each other, they could see the speechlessness in each other's eyes. This kid in front of them seemed to come out for a comedy performance. The most embarrassing thing was that the masked man seemed to feel that it wasn't enough, and deliberately stroked his hair coquettishly, and danced around a few times under everyone's gaze. This guy didn't come out for a joke, right? Or is he a comedian deliberately invited by the leader? The current oppressive atmosphere in the entertainment organization. Dedale's old face suddenly turned black, as ugly as a black pot. The corners of his mouth kept twitching. He suddenly felt that teaming up with Scorpion in the past was the happiest time because this guy in front of him seemed to be the type who was lacking a string in his brain. He's like a comedian, but it's very to my taste. Oh, hello, I'm Kisame. Kisame smiled at the masked man, and first greeted him. His shark face squeezed out a creepy smile, although it seemed to be a simple greeting, but there was always a feeling of eating people. Senpai, don't eat me, my thin arms and legs are not enough to fill the gap between your teeth. The masked man covered his face with his hands as if he had seen a terrifying creature that he had never seen before. He seemed to be scared silly as he retreated. Why didn't I see this kid like this when he was with me before? Wu Chen's mouth twitched without a trace. He looked at the masked man, Obito, and slandered him in his heart. Although he knew that during the mission with Dead Ale, the masked man's performance was so strange, he couldn't help but sweat for Dead Ale. The personalities of these two people didn't seem to belong to the normal category. In other words, there was no one with a normal personality in Akatsuki. Hey, hey, hey. Why is it always this kind of monster that enters the organization? Isn't there anyone normal? At the very least, there's someone as reliable and trustworthy as me. Haydn looked discontentedly at the masked man who was beaming with joy. He suddenly waved the 3-section scythe in his hand. It looked like he wanted to test the strength of this new member again. Is this just my imagination? Even a mere zombie would think that he's worth trusting. As if he had just heard the funniest joke, the Kismet ghost shark looked at Fei Duan with ridicule in his eyes. Hearing Ghost Mermaid, Fei Duan coldly glanced at Ghost Mermaid. Knowing that Ghost Mermaid wasn't good at talking, Fei Duan shut his mouth. This kid didn't learn a lesson at all. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry looking at Fei Duan who was carrying the scythe. He couldn't help but be speechless, sighing that this kid was hopeless. When Itachi joined Akatsuki, he had already been taught a lesson by Itachi. Later, when Dustless joined Akatsuki, this kid also challenged Dustless, but he didn't know the ability of Dustless, so he was accidentally injured by Kakuzu. Looking at his appearance now, it was obvious that he was going to teach the masked man a lesson. Wu Chen was silent. He looked at the scene that was about to play out with great interest. His face was filled with curiosity. The other members of Akatsuki looked at the masked man suspiciously. Those who could join Akatsuki were S-level defectors. This kid was weak from head to toe, and he didn't have the slightest prestige of an S-level ninja. Fei Duan coming out to test Obito was also in line with their intention, especially Pain, who was sitting on the head of the Gedomazo, didn't interfere with the duel. Obviously, he was also looking forward to the performance of the masked man. To some extent, the relationship between Uzumaki Nagato and the masked man was not harmonious. Naturally, he also wanted Fei Duan to test the ability of the masked man to prepare for future emergencies. After all, there are no real friends in this world. Under absolute interests, the enemy who killed your father can sometimes become a friend. It may sound exaggerated, but that's the case. Oh, Senpai is really ferocious. Is it really good to bully me like this? The masked man made a look of extreme fear, and immediately continued to twist his body. Looking at Dustless, he was annoyed. He secretly cursed Uchiha Obito for being the movie emperor. If he didn't know the identity of this kid in advance, he was afraid that he would have been fooled. However, the ridicule and disdain in the depths of the masked man's eyes was still clearly captured by Dustless. He knew that the masked man was deliberately teasing Fei Duan. Is it really okay for such a guy to exist in the organization? The group of members looked at each other, and they could see the embarrassment and helplessness in each other's eyes. This kid didn't look like a master at all. As Kisame said before, it was obvious that he was here to make fun of the dark atmosphere of the entertainment organization. However, Uchiha Itachi looked at the masked man from the beginning to the end. His eyes were as calm as stagnant water from time to time splashed with ripples, and then immediately calmed down and disappeared. Well, although I don't know why the leader values you, it's impossible for you to join the Akatsuki, an organization with a strict hierarchy. At least let me see how strong you are. After that, Fei Duan rushed up with her scythe. Chapter 272. ZZZ, the scarlet 3-section scythe fell on the ground, drawing a long and narrow trace, and creating faint sparks. The buzzing sound of steel made the oppressive atmosphere even gloomier. This kid is always so persistent. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, Dustless shook his head helplessly. Then, he looked at the scene in front of him. Without even thinking, he could guess that the one who asked for trouble in the end must be Fei Duan. The opponent is Uchiha Obito, a super boss. Soon, the uninterested look on his face changed to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Just as Ghost Mermaid said, this dark organization often had some funny entertainment shows, which were not bad, and could ease the atmosphere. Ah. Senpai is so scary, so scary. The masked man twisted his body coquettishly, and his movements were particularly funny. Every time he was about to fall to the ground, his body would burst out with a wonderful elastic force, making him stand up again, similar to a roly-poly toy. I actually challenged this kind of idiot. Is my brain not enough? Regret appeared on his arrogant face. Haydn couldn't help but secretly think, and secretly scolded himself for being reckless, and also labeled the masked man as incompetent in his heart. Challenging such a person, Haydn will also be treated as an idiot. Fei Dan's gaze quietly spread out, taking in the changes in everyone's expressions. After carefully observing for a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched without leaving a trace. Not to mention the other people's strange expressions for the time being, even his partner, Jiao, was looking at him with disdain. It has to be said that the strange voice and funny movements did have an unexpected effect, making everyone stare at the masked man with interest and lose their vigilance against him. Cunning enough, he made everyone lose their vigilance as soon as he came. I'm afraid no one would think that the masked man in front of them is the one behind the scenes, glancing at Obito, Dustless secretly said in his heart. At the same time, the corner of his eyes swept across everyone, and most of them lost their vigilance, with a look of expectation on their faces, watching the wonderful performance that was about to be staged in front of them with interest. Obviously, the performance of the masked man had a decisive effect. Only people like Itachi and Pain maintained indifference and secretly remained vigilant. Hurry up and scram. Dawn isn't a place for trash like you. Waving his hand, Fei Duan also lost interest in fighting. He impatiently ordered the masked man to leave. This kind of trash with less than 5 battle power was not worth his time. It would only cause him to lose face. The masked man in front of him was exceptionally plain and vulgar. There was nothing outstanding about him. The Akatsuki was a gathering of all kinds of monsters with extraordinary strength. If one wanted to stay in the organization, they had to have the same strength. Otherwise, they would only be a burden. However, the masked man obviously had no intention of quitting, and his words directly angered Flying Duan. Sorry senior, I don't intend to withdraw from Akatsuki for the time being. Even if I am not as strong as senior now, I will definitely surpass senior in the future. The masked man no longer had that mischievous smile on his face. He spoke very seriously. The determination in his tone moved everyone deeply. He did not seem to be backing down at all. Everyone looked at him in a new light. Fei Duan's ears were particularly harsh. The masked man was challenging him in disguise, challenging his authority as a big brother. It was simply outrageous. Go to hell, trash. Without waiting for the masked man to react, the 3 sections sighed and Fei Duan's hand swept up, whistling straight towards the masked man's head. Clang! With the roaring sound of steel, flashing sparks appeared in the dark space. It could be vaguely seen that the masked man used kunai to easily block the scarlet scythe. Bah, good boy, not bad. The strength of thin arms and legs is not small. Feeling the huge force coming from his hand, Fei Duan was stunned, and immediately curled his lips in disdain. He did not expect Obito's strength to be so great. Although he remained calm on the surface, he was extremely shocked in his heart. This boy is definitely not an ordinary person. His strength is not weaker than mine. His eyes narrowed, staring at that unprepossessing mask. Fei Duan's heart was like stormy waves. It was precisely because he was not good at other aspects that he strengthened his body. His strength was absolutely second to none. This boy in front of him deliberately hid his strength. It's really surprising, he can actually resist Fei Duan's attack with such a small body, even if the strength just now was less than 50%. That masked man seems not simple, there should be no problem for him to enter Akatsuki. Kakuzu's small green eyes emitted a startled light. He and Fei Duan formed a team to earn extra money all year round. Most of the time, it was Fei Duan who understood the opponent, and he was responsible for counting money, so he naturally understood Fei Duan's powerful strength. But now, Obito could easily resist Fei Duan's attack, which also showed that he was not ordinary, although this boy looked a bit sloppy. I really looked down on you before. Fei Duan's contemptuous look gradually converged, and his eyes staring at Obito, he said in a deep voice, but just now, it was less than 50% of my strength. Ha! Looking at the masked man, Fei Duan's expression quickly tightened, his arm shook, and his strength accelerated. His strong and powerful arm danced, and the powerful force directly threw the masked man out. Bang! Obviously, this force exceeded the limit of what the masked man could bear, and the masked man fell on the rock wall like a cannonball, smashing out a deep pit. In order to join Akatsuki, it must be very difficult. Dustless, who had excellent eyesight, saw at a glance that the blood stain on the corner of the masked man's mouth fell to the ground. Obviously, the masked man could dodge the attack, but he actually asked for trouble. He knew that the masked man deliberately went easy on him. Go to hell for me. However, Fei Duan did not intend to let the masked man go. He quickly ran out, and when he was still several feet away from Obito, he suddenly jumped up, as if he wanted to split him in half. Chapter 273. The gigantic black shadow whizzed down, the three sections of the scythe shining with a cold light made people tremble in fear. In the dark night sky, it was like the death god had descended from the sky, the cold light on the scythe cutting through people's souls. In this situation, no matter who it was, they would collapse. However, the masked man's eyes reflected a different sign. The single eye exposed on the mask was as calm as water, motionless like stagnant water. Instead of showing the slightest fear, it was faintly mocking and disdainful. For the masked man, Haydn was indeed just a joke. He was simply using a chess piece, and there was no other value. As if the scythe falling from the sky didn't exist, the masked man's breath was calm, like a sculpture, treating the scythe as air, ignoring it. Go to hell. As if sensing the contempt of the masked man, Fei Duan's strength became even more ferocious. Originally, he had planned to scare the masked man. After all, everyone had their own way of doing things. This kind of powerless person was not his cup of tea. But the invisible ridicule in his eyes angered him. Whoosh! The cold light came head-on, and it passed through the masked man's body and cut him in half. This guy's ability seems a bit weird. His pupils dilated, and looking at the intact masked man, Haydn's eyes flashed with horror. He just saw the masked man's body being penetrated by himself. Without hesitation, he opened a distance, and his hair stood up. Haydn's eyes subconsciously looked at Dustless. This ninjutsu that seems to ignore physical attacks coincides with Dustless's jutsu. At the same time, everyone also realized that something was wrong at that moment. Ignore physical attacks, the same jutsu as Dustless, it doesn't look like it. Pain, who was sitting on the head of the ghetto Mazo, frowned, and his eyes stared at the masked man as if he was looking at a prey. His eyes were sharp like an eagle, and he saw through the essence of the masked man. Although it is the same as Dustless's jutsu that ignores physical attacks, it seems to be a little different. The thoughts in his mind were reversed. Picking up the past Dustless and the masked man, Pain found that there was an essential difference in their existence that ignores physical attacks. Oh. Thank you, Senior, for sparing my life. Patting the dust off his butt, the masked man stood up and thanked Fei Duan, who had a pale face. His tone was extremely sincere and did not contain any falsehood. As if nothing had happened just now, the masked man didn't use any ninjutsu to turn into nothingness. Humph, do you think this is the end? Even though the masked man was wearing a mask, Fei Duan could still see the face behind his scarlet eyes that were filled with killing intent. What entered his eyes was the other party's unbridled mockery and contempt. Of course, this was all because of Fei Duan's pride. The show is about to begin. Taking a deep breath, Fei Duan said firmly in a deep voice. Just as he was about to go up and fight with the masked man, Pain's calm voice suppressed him with a majestic voice. That's all for today. From now on, Hoodlum will replace Scorpion's position. Looking around, Pain said faintly. His tone was authoritative, and no one dared to defy him. As members of the Akatsuki, the most powerful leader in the Akatsuki, no one can ignore his existence. Boy, you're lucky, you better not have a next time, otherwise. Humph. With a cold snort, Fei Duan returned to Kakuzu's side silently. These words were extremely radical, which was equivalent to tacitly admitting that Hoodlum joined the Akatsuki. Looking up and looking at the masked man, Deidara was about to complain, but he was stared back by Pain's fierce eyes. Shrinking his neck, the words that were about to come out of his mouth poured back into his heart, and Deidara closed his mouth. It's a good match. Staring at the dancing masked man with a smile, Dustless's pupils suddenly narrowed, and the gaze from his eyes was extremely dangerous. The focus of his gaze was on the masked man. This kid's ability is really troublesome. If we gather all the tailed beasts in the future, will he? Forget it, there is no need to worry about this problem. Shaking his head, Dustless's mouth had a confident smile, and his eyes were shining with a burning brilliance, like the bright stars in the night, which was particularly attractive. Sick. Looking at Dustless, who was proud of himself for no reason, Conan frowned slightly, and her face was slightly cold. She looked at him without understanding, but her words directly made Dustless vomit blood. You have to choose the right time to act up. Staring at Dustless with uncertainty, Conan sneered. Sick. Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely when he heard the words. He looked at Conan gloomily, rolled his eyes, and said angrily, sick is also lovesickness. It seemed that he was afraid that Conan didn't understand what he meant, so he added, the object of lovesickness is far away, but close at hand. After that, regardless of Conan's state, Dustless simply closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind, he was thinking about his own plan. Xiao Nan, who came back to her senses, flew into a rage out of humiliation. She glared angrily at Wu Chen, who had his eyes closed. Her pretty face was slightly red, and there was a charming dimple on her smooth pretty face. She looked like a ripe honey peach and couldn't help but want to take a bite. Her eyes were burning with flames, and she couldn't wait to tear that cheap mouth into pieces. She didn't know what the word reserved meant. Dustless was thinking about other plans in his heart. As long as he trained Uchiha Obito in the system, all problems would be solved. However, if he trained the character in the system, he would be at his peak, which means that Dustless will face the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Obito. The two sides are completely betting on a duel of life and death. Such a dramatic thing as Obito's collapse can't happen in the system. Chapter 274. Under Pain's intervention, it was inevitable that the masked man would enter the Akatsuki. After all, these two people had already passed in advance, and it was impossible to stop them. After all, Pain still had the final say in the current Akatsuki, and no one could challenge his authority. Deidara's face was full of bitterness, looking straight at the masked man who was beaming with joy as if he had eaten honey. He opened his mouth and sighed with emotion. The masked man was a big pit that he had to bear from now on, and it was impossible to get rid of him. In addition, there is one more thing. Ripples surged in Samsara's eyes, and Pain's indifferent voice resounded through the void. The traces of Second Last have not been found so far, and I don't know where that group of people hid her. If there is nothing, don't walk around at will. The enemy is eyeing covetously, and there is no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. Hearing this, Dustless nodded. Recently, the limelight was indeed too tight, and it was not suitable for action. Moreover, the Akatsuki organization was almost in a state of high concentration to do missions during this time. They were either catching tailed beasts or taking on missions to earn extra money. It was really hard. It was time to take a break. It was drizzling in the sky, and the golden color outside the window was very hazy and illusory. Year after year, human beings are really bound in the shackles of time. No wonder Orochimaru would have such thoughts. Staring indifferently at the drizzle outside the window, Dustless's face was full of emotion. Time was endless, no wonder Orochimaru longed for eternal life and explored the truth of time. It was also human nature to chase eternal life. You can even sigh, it's rare, dustless. The beautiful girl with silver hair walked out from behind, and her small hands wrapped around Dustless's waist. Her beautiful forehead rested on Dustless's head, and her beautiful eyes were also staring at the void in front of her. Even though she was nearly 30 years old, Otsutsuki Higuro still looked delicate and charming. The elegant fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Dustless looked at the beautiful woman behind him, took her into his arms, and gently covered her seductive red lips. After a long time, their lips parted, and Otsutsuki Higuro looked at Dustless in a trance, intoxicated in the taste of the fusion of water and fire just now. Sigh. Perhaps. But it's true that we should drink and sing in this world. In the end, it's all about being free and unfettered. If it's possible, I also want to wander among the flowers and pluck the world. Io, are you a tiger? Dustless screamed in pain. Feeling the stinging pain from his waist, Dustless grimaced in pain and glared at the angry Otsutsuki Haruo. The tender hand on his waist was Otsutsuki Haruo's warm jade hand. At this moment it was mercilessly ravaging the tender flesh of his waist. The pain was unbearable. Dustless could only smile bitterly as he sighed inwardly. This woman's face changed faster than flipping a book. She was just enjoying herself a moment ago, but now, she had turned into a hag in the blink of an eye. There should be a limit to how arrogant you can get. How dare you boast shamelessly in front of your wife? Next time, it won't be such a simple matter, Dustless. She fiercely glanced at Dustless, her beautiful eyes slightly narrowed, and her expression was lazy. The warm embrace was like poison. Otsutsuki Haruo arched her body, changed into a comfortable sleeping position, and closed her eyes. Her white and tender arms tightly grasped Dustless's arm for fear that he would slip away. Her jade face was peacefully pillowed on Dustless's arm. Her spotless face was unusually serene and full of enjoyment. The blazing warmth from his chest made her feel very comfortable. She quickly fell asleep like a kitten with a satisfied smile on the corner of her mouth. Hoo-hoot's steady and gentle breathing came out from Yuluo's nose. The rhythmic nasal sound was like the sound of nature, and Dustless was addicted to it. You're also one of the strongest, but your sleeping posture is still so idiotic. What if someone kills you with a sneak attack? Looking at the sleeping beauty in his arms, Dustless shook his head helplessly, and then involuntarily scratched her nose. Otsutsuki Haruo wrinkled her nose discontentedly, and her delicate face was frozen, showing slight dissatisfaction, silently protesting. With this unguarded sleeping posture, I'm afraid that ordinary people can easily kill Yuluo, a top powerhouse with Tensigen. Quietly staring at the sleeping beauty, Dustless's mouth outlined a gentle smile, like the winter sun, bright and unusually warm, and a raging flame rose in his indifferent heart. Indifferently looking at the void in front of him, the doubts in Dustless's eyes disappeared, and his eyes were exceptionally clear and sharp. Maybe it's because of this feeling that Uzumaki Naruto is like an unkillable cockroach, getting stronger without limit, from the so-called last place to a peerless hero. Stroking Yuluo's beautiful face, Dustless secretly smiled. Just now, he had a violent feeling that as long as someone dared to hurt Yuluo, he would definitely tear them into pieces. Even though Dustless and Yuluo are husband and wife, Dustless didn't have this feeling. Suddenly looking back, after getting along with each other for more than 10 years, the patriarch of the Otsutsuki family from the moon has completely stepped into the depths of his heart. What a child. Taking a deep breath, staring at the beautiful woman, Dustless stood up gently, for fear of disturbing the sleeping beauty, and carefully carried Yuluo to the bedroom. Dustless secretly swore in his heart, from now on, Otsutsuki Haruo will be the object of his protection. No matter in the future or in the future, anyone who dares to hurt her will be destroyed and sent to the 18th layer of hell, never to be reincarnated. Even if it's a god, there is no exception. After recuperating for a few days, I can train Obito. On the wooden corridor, there was a sound of ta-ta-ta. Looking up, it was Dustless holding Yuluo. The characters in the training system are in the peak state. As for the kind of comedy scene where the opponent collapses, it's impossible to happen. It's only about the confrontation of life and death. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. There is no turning back once you step on the road of death, and if you succeed in the training, you will naturally take everything from the opponent. Chapter 275. Endless starlight dotted the blue void, and the monotonous sky became more vivid, with a little more vitality. At this moment, Dustless was already in the world inside the system. The world inside the system was the same except for the void, which was a little strange. The ground was composed of mountains and rivers, and it was an endless emerald green. Yo, it's been a long time. Ling, you're much more beautiful than before. On the open plain, a gentle breeze blew. Wuchen smiled and stared at the graceful figure in front of him. He said with a playful smile, "If anyone can marry you, I'm afraid he will wake up laughing in his sleep." Of course, that includes me. The slender and peerless figure in front of him was clearly visible, like a goddess above the ninth heaven. She was more arrogant and untouchable than Otsutsuki Dustless. Her aura was also much stronger, like the ruler of the sky. The whole sky was crawling under her feet. Heaven and earth were so small, let alone a mere Dustless. This kind of arrogant, powerful, and beautiful woman could arouse the desire of countless people to conquer her. Yes, I haven't seen you for a while. Your strength hasn't improved much, but your eloquence has improved a lot. You're really impressive, Dustless. Ling Er's delicate face was always cold and detached from the world. She said expressionlessly, turning a deaf ear to Dustless's teasing. Only you can say that. Dustless smiled bitterly, and his heart was particularly bitter. No matter when he was in front of Ling he was very small. Dustless often felt like he was in a fantasy. As long as he faced Ling he would be killed in an instant. You don't come to the temple without a reason. Say it, who are you going to train with this time? Seeing through Dustless's purpose at a glance, Ling asked expressionlessly. Dustless came here for training. It was absolutely impossible for him to do anything else. Don't be so cold. No matter what, we're from the same roots. We're bound together for good or ill. Wuchen smiled embarrassedly. He was rather embarrassed. He also knew that he had neglected Ling all these years. He had completely treated her as a tool. It was indeed a bit unreasonable. He had completely ignored her. Since you know that we are born from the same root, then don't talk nonsense. Your death won't do me any good. Ling coldly glanced at Dustless as she spoke in a resolute tone. Her eyes were cold, clearly unable to accept Dustless's words. Hearing this, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of hesitation. Thinking of Uchiha Obito, his eyes were full of caution. If it was Uchiha Obito in the early stage, Dustless would be fine. However, Uchiha Obito at his peak was a super-dimensional character like the Jinchuriki of the Jubi. If it was just the Jubi, it wouldn't be a big deal, it would just be a simple display of power, but after the Jubi was absorbed by Obito, it meant that the power of the Jubi was also under Obito's control. The difference was like heaven and earth. You are still afraid? This is funny. Her beautiful eyes widened as she stared at Dustless with interest. Ling Er's thin lips curled into a contemptuous smile as she said sarcastically, "When you first came to this world, you were not afraid of anything." Staring at Dustless, her wise eyes seemed to see through Dustless's thoughts. Ling Er's light voice was like the sound of nature as she said elegantly, "It's normal for you to be afraid of a monster like the Jubi. He is indeed not someone you can match," Ling said slowly. The Jubi has completely exceeded human cognition. The boundless chakra, the immortal body, and all kinds of powerful ninjutsu, Dustless is really not his opponent. So what? Frowning, staring at Ling tightly, Dustless asked faintly, "The essence of the sacred tree's existence is to be used. Being used by Otsutsuki Kagaya is one thing, being used by me is another. What's more, I don't think I am worse than her. At least, Kagaya's era has come to an end, and my era is slowly rising. After all, everyone is just a thief. Kaguya can steal the power of the sacred tree. Dustless doesn't think that he can't. You really dare to say that? Staring at Dustless's face, Ling said as usual. Obviously, she had expected Dustless to say such a thing. She asked indifferently, "Who are you going to train with, and the rules?" "I don't need to say it. If you want to take everything from the other party, you must kill him completely, and if you are killed, you will die completely, and there will be no turning back. There is no free lunch in the world, and it is the same in the system. If you defeat the system's character, you can take everything from him. If you fail the challenge, Dustless himself will also die. In other words, it is a bet of life and death. If you lose, it means that everything will be completely over. Name your character, Dustless." Taking a deep breath, Ling, who was transformed by the system's consciousness, asked. Dustless will become any character he chooses to train with, and then the two sides will engage in a cruel battle. Uchiha Obito. With a cold light in the depths of his eyes, Dustless exhaled heavily, and immediately shouted in a deep voice. His tone was sonorous and powerful, and his confidence was unusually firm. "As you wish." As Ling's voice fell, her perfect body suddenly swept out a dazzling white luster, and the suppressed terrifying chakra erupted without warning, raging like a level 10 hurricane. Boom boom boom, because it couldn't bear the powerful chakra, the ground where Ling was standing before suddenly shattered. It was extremely fragile, as if it was a piece of paper that couldn't withstand a single blow. A giant pit hundreds of meters deep in the ground was clearly visible. What a terrifying chakra wave. His pupils suddenly shrank, Dustless's heart was shocked like a stormy sea. He could clearly perceive that the flowing air around him was directly evaporated into nothingness by the hot chakra and disappeared without a trace. The world was like a steamer, extremely hot, and the whole space was boiling. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.